We are Eric and Becky Chance. Jackie's right. We got married on a Friday, and we were in her office the following Wednesday to find out more stuff. A little bit about us. We met in 2015. We're married in 2018. Both of us wanted kids. It was actually a second marriage for both of us. We were too old to be going through infertility treatments, didn't want to do it. So we both agreed that we wanted to check out adoption. Adoption is something that I've wanted to do ever since I was like, I don't know, young, 10, 11 years old. I actually remember the moment I knew that I wanted to adopt. I was sitting in a Wendy's with my mom. And remember, they used to actually put placemats on the little trays, and there was the Dave Thomas Foundation placemat. And I remember asking my mom, what it was about, and she explained it, and she said it was something that she had actually thought about, but she was worried about how it would affect my brother and I growing up. And I knew right then and there that I wanted to do it when I grew up, and it was something I wanted. We talked to a couple different agencies. We checked out like 3 or 4 different agencies. Jackie's Open Arms, and Jackie was the first one we talked to. We left there and we knew from that moment that that's where we were going to end up. But we wanted to do our due diligence and check out some of the other agencies. And we just didn't have that connection with any of them. We felt like a number. We felt that there was just not that warm, fuzzy, I'm truly looking out for you feeling like we got with Jackie. Especially when I contacted her a month later and she said, "Oh, you were the ones that came in on your honeymoon." And we said, "Yeah, that's us." Yeah, she knew exactly who we were. So I have bullet points here. We went through our training. It was the snowiest January ever, the worst snowstorm ever that we had. And we went through our training, and we both, when we went into it, I was open to older children. He so much wasn't, wanted the infant. So we kind of went into both programs, infant and sibling group, and whatever came upon us first.
I will interject. That was before training that I was set on an infant, and
yes,
during the training, it really, really changes your perspective. Jackie's team does a great job. So I was ready to go as soon as we were done with training.
I even pulled Jackie aside at training and said, "I think we almost have him there." And we did. So again, it was, whichever happened first. Jackie told us, hey, yeah, you can look online. There's different, different state sites that are better than others that are up to date. So, I was looking online, contacting Jackie constantly. The job I had at the time was very school-based, and it was kind of during the summer at this point. So we were not very busy. So I had a lot of time on my hand. And Jackie and Eric had to reel me in constantly. I was sending her like, "Hey, do you know anything about this sibling group? Like, it's a sibling group of 6. Now, granted, we have 0 kids, right? And we're going to go to 6, right? Yeah. So I would still take 6, by the way. But anyhow.
We had just bought a 3-bedroom house at the time.
4.
So 4.
So, just like Jackie and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago, nowhere does it say each kid has to have their own room. You can put more than one in a room. They can share. Anyhow, we found our children online, and there's our daughter. And I asked Jackie, I said, do you know anything about them? They were actually living in New Mexico at the time. And she did not. She said, go ahead, submit your home study, see what they say. So she did, and we were actually one of 1,500 home studies that were submitted on these kids. And we were narrowed down to one of 5 families and then picked for these kids. We fell in love with them from the moment we saw them. The little one, we saw his picture first. He's our charmer. His name is Javier. We knew just from the minute we saw him, he's honestly like the sweetest thing in the entire world.
He knows it.
He does. He does. And he uses it to his benefit quite often. Our daughter is the Spitfire. She'll give us a run for our money. She already does. And then our oldest, his name is James. The very first picture we saw of him, his eyes were hollow, is the best way I can describe it. He looked absolutely just blank. There was nothing behind his eyes. And I knew from that moment on, he's the one that's the most hurt. He's obviously the oldest. He has seen the most. He's the one that's been through the most. And we were right, just from the pictures. Their personalities 100% fit what we thought. James is our old soul. Jackie had told us one time that in her 30 years of doing this, he's the most insightful 8-year-old boy that she has ever met. He's one of a kind. I'm gonna cry. I'm just warning you now.
If she does, I will.
Yeah.
I'm a sympathetic crier.
Yes. So anyhow, we knew right from the get-go they were our children. There was a lot of meetings. We won't talk much about the state of New Mexico and the way they do things, but it's a little backwards. But anyhow, we were picked for them in March of 2019, and it was October of 2019 before we went out to get them. We signed all of our paperwork on October 25th and brought them back here home on October 28th of 2019. It started out great. The honeymoon stage is real. It is so real. And then it progressively got more challenging, as you would expect. Behaviors increased. They were testing us. You know, they don't know us from anybody. They have went through things that children should never, ever have to go through. There was a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of what were we thinking? We still have those what were we thinking moments. But I mean, what would you expect? You know, everything they've been through, I would do the same. They were testing us. We knew this. There was a lot of phone calls to Jackie. See, the thing is we were James' 7th home in 2 years. We were Ariel and Javier's 5th home in 2 years. We were their 2nd adoption. They had a failed adoption before us. So their lack of trust obviously was beyond real. They did not live together for about 1.5 years of the 2 years that they were in foster care. James lived separately, and Ariel and Javier were mostly together. They only saw each other occasionally, like during times of respite. They didn't know how to be siblings. They were finally reunited in June of 2019 to try and learn how to be siblings. James was very much the parentified child. He was in charge of his brother and sister. Before they were removed from their birth mother, James was 5 years old, changing his little baby brother's diapers and taking care of him for days on end, and his 3-year-old sister. Just things that no 5-year-old should even know how to do. They didn't know how to be siblings. They didn't know, they looked at James as their parent. They still do sometimes. we have to remind them a lot. We're mom and dad. Well, James says this. Well, James isn't your dad. We're your parents. We make the rules. And we have to remind James quite often, you're not the dad. We make the rules here. But they've gotten much better. I'm a stay-at-home mom. When they came home, you can ask Jackie, I was determined to go back to work. Working was very much a part of who I am. It was part of my identity. I did go back just part-time in the beginning. And the two older kids were in school, and I had a conversation with them. And I said, if you were sick and you needed to come home from school, would you want mom to be at work and be able to leave and come get you and bring you home? Or would you want me to be home and be able to come get you and bring you home? They said, we want you to be home. And I said, well, why? I can come get you either way. And they said, but we would know you were home. You would be there to come and get us. This is where I'm going to cry. The youngest one, Javier, was 3 years old at the time. And I took him to the sitter. And it was a private in-home sitter. She was wonderful. And on my it was my first or second day of him at daycare, I came into the house. He was like playing with some stuff. He looked up. He said, Mommy, you came back from home. And he came running over to me. He thought I was just leaving him at another house. And I went in the next day and put in my 2 weeks notice. And I don't regret it at all. Are there times where I miss being able to feel like a quote-unquote productive member of society? Sure. Are there times when I'm really sick of picking up that same toy and cleaning that same stuff? Sure. But I was where I needed to be. I needed to be there for them. That's what they needed. And that's what we were there to do. Even to this day, I mean, it's been 2 years since they've been home. I still have to reassure them. And it's something that we're going to have to reassure them for the rest of their lives. Literally just a couple days ago, my daughter, I'm walking through the yard. She's on the trampoline. She's like, Mom, do you love me? I'm like, yeah. Like, why are you asking me this? Like, of course I love you. She's like, oh, okay. And so I was giving her, we were doing bath, and I said, why would you ask if I loved you? And she said, well, I just want to make sure. And I said, there's nothing you could ever do that would ever make me not love you. It does not matter. I said, I will love you until the day I die. And I will do whatever it takes to make sure that you know that. So please don't ever, ever question if I love you or not. Because there is nothing on the face of the earth that you could do that would make me not love you. My youngest, actually, and my oldest, in the beginning with my oldest, I had to hold him like a baby. He was 8 years old at the time, but just hold him. And he fought it at first. He was like, what are you doing to me? Like, why are you holding me like this? But then after a while, it became like our time. He craved it. He wanted it because they didn't have that growing up. My youngest to this day, we have to pretend that he's a baby. I have to cradle him, pretend bottle feed him, pretend burp him, pretend change his diaper. And it's fulfilling that need that he didn't get. He was only 10 months old when he was removed from his birth mom. But that trauma and that neglect goes that far back subconsciously. And actually that kind of died down a little bit. But just over the last week, he's done it about 2 or 3 more times. So that need is there, and it's going to be there. And I don't care if the kid's 17 and he needs me to pretend burp him, I'll do it. I mean, whatever he needs, I don't care. A couple of the things that I could say that we've learned is that you have to give yourself some grace, especially as parents. We went from 0 to 3, and we went. It's hard enough to parent, a neurotypical child, let alone a child who comes from trauma, neglect, abuse, children who are neurodivergent, who have ADHD, Tourette's, FASD, just anything that you don't, you can't physically see. And our children have some of those. So it makes it even harder, but you have to give yourself some grace, because how you think you're going to parent those children isn't going to work. And Jackie's the first one who told me that. And she kept saying, you need to give it up. It's not going to work. And I was like, but this is all I know, And so it was a lot of research of different parenting techniques that would kind of work for us. And we did them, and it works. But there is times, we're both 44 years old, and for 42 years we thought we were going to parent one way. So you fall back into those patterns, and you have to remind yourself, hey, I've been yelling a lot lately over the last week, and it ain't working. And you have to be your child's advocate. If you have to be their voice. No one ever was. And that is now your job. We have watched our oldest, even through COVID. When he came to us, he needed an IEP. He was not on one in New Mexico. We have watched him in 2 years, and even homeschooling, and I am far from a good teacher for homeschooling. He has tested out of his IEP. He is in regular general classes. He's doing wonderfully with A's and B's. And it just shows what stability, love, connection, just being there and providing for them, how much it helps.
He couldn't read.
He could not read at all. And he would get so mad, like even if we would read to him, because he was embarrassed. Now, birthday, Christmas, what's he ask for? Books. Our adoption was finalized on September 29th of 2020, quite longer than expected because of COVID. It was over Zoom. I cried through the entire thing. From the moment the magistrate said, do you wish to adopt these children? I lost it. And when it was said and done and the cameras were off, James came over to us and he wrapped his arms around me and he sobbed. And he literally collapsed in my arms and sobbed because he knew he was safe. It was done. He was not going anywhere. He was home. They were all home. They were together. And we're ready for number 4, 5, 6, whatever. She's already looking for us, so. And the kids are all about it. They want more siblings, so that's our story. Thank you.